Finding ʻOli, Part 2. They loved swimming together, Anita bobbing up with ʻOli from time to time as she took a breath of air at the surface. Mirroring was the most fun. Right flipper, right arm. Left flipper, left arm. Anita kept time with ʻOli, who swam a few feet below her. The happy summer sped by. Anita had never been so excited. She was running down to the beach, her eyes already scanning the waves, planning another day with ʻOli. Whoops! Kerplunk! Her feet went out from under her, and she fell flat on her stomach, her leg a stab of pain. She hardly dared to look. A stream of blood was flowing from a deep cut just below her knee. She slowly raised herself up. Right behind her, a sharp tip of lava rock peered out of the sand. She squeezed her eyes shut against the pain and could just hear her parents' frequent warnings. Watch where you're going. Slow down. Pay attention to the hidden lava rock. Anita hobbled home and called out to her mother. Anita, what on earth has happened to you? Her mother cried in alarm. Anita could hardly answer. One look at her daughter's face and the blood running down her leg, and her mother knew a trip to the emergency room was called for. She wrapped a clean towel around the cut, bundled Anita into the car, and off they sped. The ER doctors and nurses were kind and efficient. They quickly cleaned the wound and stitched it up. Anita was just feeling the beginning of relief when the terrible news came. You'll have to stay out of the water until this is completely healed, the doctor told her sternly. Ocean water contains bacteria that can cause serious infections. How long will that be? She asked in a small voice. I'm afraid it might be as long as a month, the doctor answered. She leaned against her mother and hid her face. A whole month without ʻOli? How would she bear it? It was a sad and silent ride home. Anita climbed out of the car and said, I'm going down to the beach. Her mother said nothing but let her go. Anita sat on the sand gazing out toward the reef, thinking of her friend. She decided to look for trash to clean up, which made her feel better since that would help all of her ocean friends. She was almost dizzy with excitement when the doctor finally gave her permission to get back in the water. She ached with the missing of ʻOli. The next day, she and her mother swam out to the reef. Anita's head danced with questions. Will she be here? Will she remember me? Anita's eyes scanned the crevices and outcroppings of coral, and there she was, her ʻOli. But as they got closer, they noticed that something was terribly wrong. ʻOli did not come up to greet them as usual. Anita and her mother looked at each other through their mask, asking silently, Do you see what I see? Can this really be happening to the one we love? On the side of ʻOli's neck was a huge lump, almost as big as a golf ball. It was big enough to make it difficult for her to move her neck. What had happened? What could they do to help? Her mother signaled her to turn back, and with broken hearts, they returned to the shore. Slipping into their flip-flops, anxious and confused, they rushed home. Anita was fighting back tears. Her mother was quiet, thinking of the best way to save her daughter's precious friend. As soon as she walked in the door, Anita's mother was on the phone to Cheryl, hoping she would know what to do. Cheryl was immediately ready to help. She knew a scientist in Honolulu on the island of Oahu who could help advise them. Let's call our friend George at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. Since we worked with him to tag ʻOli, he'll remember, and he knows how endangered hawksbills are. So every single one is extremely important. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Anita wondered if such a busy man who has tagged so many turtles would be interested in one sick little hawksbill. She learned a lot on that tagging research day, especially how much adults cared about turtles and the ocean. She never knew sea turtles got the same teeny tags as pet dogs and cats, and measuring ʻOli confirmed just how small she was. Her shell measured 38.5 centimeters long, and she only weighed 11.5 pounds. To find out more about them, the biologist also caught some honu and two other hawksbills that day, who had the names MUI-11, the turtle formerly known as Prince, and MUI-15, Hope, who were much bigger than ʻOli. As Cheryl had explained before, George also told Anita that ʻOli was too small to tell whether it was a boy or a girl. They have to be an adult size, twice as big as ʻOli is now. But Anita always thought of ʻOli as a joyful girl. Her scientific number in Cheryl's photo ID database is MUI 27. Anita also remembered all the fishing line and hooks they cleaned up off the beach that day. Is this what happened to ʻOli's neck? Or was it something that ʻOli ate? Did she have a disease? Or what? There are so many dangers in the ocean, ʻOli has to survive every day. Would they ever know the truth? Cheryl called back moments later. George has given me permission to examine ʻOli, she said with excitement. Then I'll report back to him and we'll take it from there. Let's go out tomorrow morning. The next day, Cheryl and her boyfriend Jake met Anita on the beach. They were so kind and so interested in helping ʻOli. They swam quickly out to the reef. Anita led Cheryl right to ʻOli's spot, and there she was, sadly hiding under the coral. The sparkle had disappeared from her half-closed eyes. The lump on her neck looked even bigger now than it had yesterday. Carefully, Cheryl dove down to ʻOli's resting place and reached out her hand to ʻOli's neck. The sick turtle seemed to welcome Cheryl's gentle touch. She made no attempt to swim away. She slowly brought ʻOli to the surface to have a better look. The lump was something Cheryl hadn't seen before in all the turtles she knew. Back on shore, Cheryl contacted George and talked with him about what could be done. Anita saw the concern on Cheryl's face and became even more frightened. Cheryl turned to her and said, "Try not to worry too much, Anita. It's because of your love for ʻOli that she's now going to get the help she needs. Have hope." George came up with a plan. He would fly to Maui himself. Then he would swim out and find and catch ʻOli. In a special carrier, ʻOli would fly to Honolulu, where George had arranged to have her examined by another turtle specialist, a veterinarian. It seemed like an impossible dream, but now there was reason to hope. At the appointment time, George arrived with a large dog carrier and snorkel gear. They had called on Auntie Miley and other friends to help in the search and rescue mission. The sea was treacherous that morning. Enormous waves churned, and the sand and visibility was near zero. "Oh, Anita," her mother said with a sigh of dismay, "I can't let you go out in this. You're not strong enough, and your leg is only just healed." "Mama," Anita cried, "ʻOli will die if we don't find her today." "I'm afraid your mother's right, Anita," Cheryl said. "We can't worry about losing you too. With all of us searching, I know we will find her." Anita stood, looking down at her sandy feet, unwilling to yield. "Anita," Cheryl continued, "we're not only helping ʻOli. Countless other turtles may benefit from what the veterinarians learned from her. Your ʻOli is a very special sea turtle. We will find her." Anita's disappointment was eased somewhat by a swelling of pride. ʻOli had become the most cherished thing in her own life, and now ʻOli would be an important part of many other lives as well. "Let's go!" George called. The searchers plunged into the wild waters. The waves were so high it would be all but impossible for them to signal to one another. They searched and searched. Precious time was passing, and hope was fading. Anita waited anxiously on the shore, feared that this one chance for ʻOli's rescue would fail. Suddenly, a turtle's head bobbed over the top of a wave. It was coming toward shore. Anita had never seen ʻOli venture so close to the shoreline, but hope surged within her. She waved and pointed and called out. Cheryl saw her signal and managed to catch a glimpse of the turtle. It was ʻOli. It was a miracle. ʻOli was making it easy for her rescuers, as if she understood that they had come to help her. George also saw the turtle and swam toward her. He reached through the murky water and felt for the back of ʻOli's shell. Wrapping his strong arms around ʻOli, he felt the frightened turtle nestle into his chest. Without a struggle, they swam to shore. The crowd on the beach cheered. Anita blinked back the tears of joy. Cheryl and the others came scrambling back onto the beach, exhausted but exuberant. Not wanting to waste time, George carefully placed ʻOli in her carrier and thanked everyone on the beach. Anita tried to imagine what ʻOli must be feeling. Out of the water, all these strangers, locked in a cage. But things were happening so quickly. George had placed ʻOli in his car, and with a final wave, they were off to Kahului Airport and their flight to Honolulu. George had promised to return in 5 days. 5 days? It felt like an eternity to Anita. She tossed and turned in her bed all night. Nightmare visions swam before her eyes of a frightened little turtle, all alone, yearning for the water. Her worst fear was that she might never see ʻOli again. We hope you've enjoyed watching part 2 of this true story about a little hawksbill sea turtle named ʻOli.